Hi everyone, and welcome to the part 3 of this episode. In this part we're going to talk about hard drives. First we're going to talk about what are hard drives and how do they work, and then we're talking about the connections of the hard drive. Then we're going to compare SSD and HDD, and after that we're going to talk about some specifications of the hard drive and what you have to look for when you want to buy a hard drive which is suitable for your use or for your computer. So first let's talk about what is a hard drive. So hard drive is storage part of your computer. That means all of your data, all of your information, you're going to store them in your hard drive. There are some other parts that you can store data in temporarily, like for example in RAM. You can store your data in RAM as long as your computer is not turned off. As soon as you turn off your computer, all of those information is going to disappear. For that reason, they will call RAM a volatile storage or a volatile memory. So that's why it's very important to always save everything that frequently. In case your computer shut off for any reason, you won't lose your data. So from that we know that hard drive is going to be non-volatile. That means even if your computer turned off, you can still access your information. And then we're going to talk about how does a hard drive work. In this picture we're seeing what is inside of a hard drive. There are some main parts of a hard drive, and one of them is this magnetic disk, and the other one is this actuator arm. So all the information and data is going to be stored in the form of zeros and ones on this disk, and the way that the computer is able to read or write on this disk is that it will turn around, and then this actuator arm can go back and forth. So this way it will know, this way it will go to the place that you stored your data in. And in this picture we can see that there are a couple of disks on top of each other, which means that it is more place for the storage, and each one of these disks have its own actuator, but because of the angle of this picture we're not able to see the other actuators. So yeah, this is pretty much how the hard drive works, and the information will be transferred through this arm. The head of this arm is able to put zeros and ones on top of your magnetic disks, and that's how it stores the data. And then after that, when it wants to read it, to get the information, to take it to CPU, RAM, or anywhere else which is required, it is able to see if that recorded information was a 0 or was a 1. And now let's talk about the connections of the hard drive. So there are two main connections of the hard drive. They're pretty much just these two that we're using. One of them is both of them are SATA. So the first one is the power SATA, which is coming from your power supply, and we talked about it before in previous videos. And the other one is your data SATA, which is transferring the information, which was coming from the actuator arm. So yeah, these are pretty much the two connections that you need for your hard drive, one to power it on and the other one is for transferring the data from or to your hard drive. And then let's talk about the difference between SSD and HDD. Okay, so there are some huge differences between SSD and HDD. They're both, the purpose of both of them is to store data, but SSD does it in electronic way and HDD does it in mechanical way. So there are some advantages and disadvantages to both of them, so you always want to just figure out which one works best for you. So let's first talk about SSD. SSD is using flash memory, so it means that there is no disk, there is no ARM, nothing is spinning, it is just electronic. Everything is electronic, what is happening inside of it. And so one of the most important benefit to that is that since it doesn't need to, the disk doesn't actually need to turn around, and there is no arm to go and find where the information was stored, and everything is just done electronically, the speed is so much higher. So that means your performance will noticeably be higher. So that's one. And then another thing, because of that, your HDD or your hard drive is going to be slower than your SSD for sure. But there are some disadvantages to SSD as well. One of the most important disadvantages to SSD is that you cannot continuously erase and write on your SSD, because it has it will bring the life expectancy to a lower level. So if you are writing and erasing on your SSD a lot, that means your SSD is going to die sooner. And again, there are some factors that may cause problem for HDD or hard drive as well. For example, because they're all mechanical parts, so there's so many things that could go wrong with that. The disk that turns around, it might get attached, it might get scratched with the actuator arm. If there is a if you drop it on the ground or something like that, something might happen to your disk, and it might have a catastrophic failure as well. So for both of them, there are disadvantages, that their life expectancy can become lower. But you need to always consider, when you're buying the SSD, if you're erasing a lot and writing a lot on your hard drive, it's better to not use the SSD, because it's going to die sooner. Another thing is the price. SSDs are normally way higher in price than HDD. There's a huge gap between them, so that means that you can get, for example, maybe 14 terabyte of your hard drive, and it's going to be the same price as having, for example, 1 or 6 terabyte of your SSD. So that is another thing that you want to consider. So there is a speed, performance, and there is life expectancy that you want to consider if you want to get SSD or HDD. Another way of doing it, and I heard some people do it, is that they're using SSD for some functions on their computer, for some of the things that they do, and they use HDD for other things that they do. For example, they boot their computer and they store the main programs on their SSD, so that means that they're going to their computer performance is faster, and then those parts that they need to erase or they need to store lots of data, they use an HDD, and they store those information on their HDD. And now let's talk about the specifications of hard drive, and how you can see based on these specification how is that hard drive. So one of them is rotational speed. Rotational speed is talking about the how fast this disk turns around, obviously, and the higher the rotational speed is, the faster your hard drive is going to be, because obviously it's going to turn faster and it's going to get to the destination faster. So that is one thing to consider. Another thing to consider is the size of your HDD. There are two sizes for your hard drive. One is I'm guessing 2.5 inch, and the other one have to be 3.5 inch, which is used mostly, and the bigger one is mostly used for computers, for desktops, and the smaller one is normally used for laptops. So you want to make sure that you buy the right one, so you will have enough space to put your hard drive inside of your computer. And another thing we want to talk about is the capacity. There are different type of hard drive exist, that they have different capacities from 1 terabyte, 6 terabyte to 14 terabyte, and you want to see how much, what is your usage. Are you using your computer for everyday basic use, for example, just browsing something on Google and writing an essay or something like that, so you don't need that much storage. But if you are a gamer, probably you need more storage, or if you are somebody who has lots of videos to save, or lots of information and data they need to save, it's better to use higher capacity. So I hope this video was helpful for you and you enjoyed it, and see you in the next video. Bye.